What up, y'all? Back again. I just wanted to do part 3 to this mud flood that I've been series that I've been doing. So I think I left off somewhere along the lines of the coins and the money and the 1,000 years or 800 to 1,000 years added to the calendar, the Gregorian calendar. So next, I wanted to talk about the maps. Before the 1800s, you're going to find that all the maps, the shorelines have shrunk all over the earth because the mud flood happened after 1800. And you'll find these maps were spot on. So they had amazing technology to have built these infrastructure and these buildings, these beautiful buildings, the architecture, the monoliths and the friezes and frescoes, the paintings, the I believe even the music from that era that came out was even amazing. But the murals and things. But I guess what I wanted to say is all of the shoreline sunk after the mud flood occurred. It made them, some more of the shores were underwater all over the earth. And what you'll find is, California was an island, and I think it was Tasmania was connected to Australia before the mud flood, according to the maps. They were all spot on. There was tons of cartographers, so you can look at each individual person who drew their own map, and they were all the same. And then, like I said, the Suez and the Panama Canal and the canals and things, they were there already. We just dug them back out. The North Pole was on there, as the 4 rivers coming out of Eden were actually coming out of the North Pole first. And that is the center of the flat or concave Earth that we believe, most of us believe on these channels, is the way the Earth's cosmology is. You'll find that there was no ice and snow for that 1,000-year period. What it says in, I think it's Isaiah, that the sun would be like 7 times the brightness or something. And you'll find that there was a lot of cities, major cities all over the place, even in like places where it's cold now, like Siberia. And Siberia was full of major cities that seems like it's been completely destroyed, bombed out, so bad that there's almost nothing there but holes in the ground, and it's frozen and stuff. But, before the 1800s and stuff, it shows that there was cities there. There was cities in places like Iceland, Greenland, places like that. There was places, the desert didn't seem to be a desert because it was full of cities and castles and stuff. And somebody speculated, and I thought that was an interesting thought, that where sand in these deserts are, maybe what happened was where you see the hills in the deserts, maybe actually structures under there that have created those hills in the deserts. Because they said, some people have believed that sand would be flat if there was, but the old maps show cities under there. So it's very interesting. I mean, I guess what could have happened is in the mud flood, there could have been, everything, sunk and then dried, and it's so hot there, it got scorched, turned to sand. I don't know. But it's a fascinating topic. You'll find that there is what looks like, like what a lightning bolt looks like in the sky. You'll find that is throughout, like places like Colorado, like where the Grand Canyon is, and those areas. Like maybe something struck it, like the fervent heat during the tribulation. There was a lot of stuff that it looks like streaks of lightning hit the ground, and it indented it with the lightning streaks. I don't know how that works exactly, but that the fervent heat maybe from the tribulation caused a lot of this. Some people speculate. And this dark dirt that they have may have been related to it as well from the fervent heat. But yeah, a lot of things have changed, and a lot of cities are no more in some of these areas where there were cities, according to these maps. And it seems as though that, it got really cold around 1812, and they had to add fireplaces to the outside of these cathedrals and buildings in Russia and other places where, now we know it to be cold, freezing cold. And even in America, you'll see like additional fireplaces added. They weren't included in the original building of the structure, because after a certain point in time, it got cold, and then the ice on the earth, like where Antarctica and all that was, that does not show ice. And, we're, a lot of us that believe the flat earth cosmology believe also there's an ice wall around us, but before that it was land. It shows on the old maps like a circle of land, which is now an ice wall, and that the ice wall goes forever. But we are still enclosed and encapsulated in a dome, a firmament with water above us. But that when, say Noah's Ark occurred, that God opened the windows to heaven and also had the springs blow and bust from under the earth as well. And that's where you got what I believe and what it seems like in the text, that, and then the lands began to part. So I think that's when, we had whatever you call that Pangea thought in the world would say, but where the land was all connected before the flood, but during the flood it busted, and it said that they began to part and slowly, kind of stretch out. So I think that's where we got the continents and stuff after the flood. And then if you're wondering, like, well, if God flooded the earth out and added water to it, how did it dissipate? But, like a lot of us believe that the earth, and it's really hard not to believe the earth is hollow to some degree. There's a lot of what a lot of us believe, the inner earth has, there could be cities down there for all we know. But when people talk about dimensions and going into different dimensions, that's what I believe is a different dimension. Like, they would say going under the water, like kind of where, Jonah he got to the gates of Sheol hell when he repented. Of course, I believe he was in his death, and I believe Sheol hell was the physical place of spiritual hell is under the earth, deep down under the earth. But, and that's one of the passageways to get there, because that's where, when the devils were, went into the pigs with Legion in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or whatever, they ran the pigs off the mountain into the ocean. And, they talk about the marine kingdom as well, which I'll probably do a series on that down the road. But there are these structures everywhere, and then they also did not need to use the restroom, because it's obvious you could build these structures that are just amazing, and we can't build them today, and they had drainage for water runoff, but they didn't have any bathrooms or kitchens. So it makes you wonder, did the saints, maybe they just didn't need to eat. They had different types of bodies. Remember, it talks about their glorified bodies, which we know very little about, but that they're didn't have to go to the restroom, because if so, they would have built restrooms. But what looks to be is that they didn't need to eat or go to the restroom, because they'd have 500 bed hotels and like the Palace of Versailles, Conspiracy R Us did a series on that, and they had like one bathroom or something, I mean, so there were a few of the regular people is what we believe. So there were regular people, a few of them, but most of them were the saints is what we believe. Either or, Even the regular people maybe didn't have to use the restroom. I don't know. But what it seems like is that's the case, because you can't have full-on cities like in Paris and St. Petersburg with no kitchens and no bathrooms. So what happened was we went to repopulate these cities around the 1860s or so, and I guess everybody was going to the restroom in the rivers and on the ground, and they were all dying of cholera, because they didn't have restrooms, and we were getting reintroduced to cities where people before us didn't need to use restrooms, and we did. And it's not like the concept wasn't there already. You can't be smart enough to build these monstrosity buildings and have drainage for, rainwater runoff, which they had, and all this wonderful infrastructure, and then not have bathrooms. I mean, it's very simple to know that, but they also could have gotten it from the Romans, which were pre-crucifixion of Christ, if we're going to go with the mainstream history. So what happened between the crucifixion of Christ, if they knew how to clean sewage water then, and then, all the way up into the 1850s, they didn't know anymore. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And, if you think about it, you don't think that you would eat or use the restroom in heaven, right? So if this is somewhat of a glorified place, then if you're in a glorified body, then you wouldn't need those things, right? You're not going to go to the bathroom in heaven. And they must have had the ability to regulate themselves, because there was no heating and air conditioning, which I think I talked about in part 2. But they had to rebuild all the infrastructure, meaning like the road systems and a lot of the, sidewalks. Some of them were dug out, but for the most part, you'd have buildings that were sunk in the mud, right? But what also sunk was the infrastructure around it. So that would be the first thing that would sink, would be the roads and the sidewalks and things. But some of them got dug out, some of them just got blocked or bricked or paved or whatever, cemented over, just on top of the old stuff that was deep down. Maybe you're not going to find any. There's like five random tombstones that you're going to find before the 1800s, and they're real fishy. Like, they've been scratched at and changed around and stuff. So you got to make yourself scratch your head that, how did they have, like, there's no tombstones, like, as far as where did all the dead bodies go? I mean, those could have sunk in the mud too, but you're not going to find any. And it's really what's really here's a fact that kills the conspiracy and makes it conspiracy theory and makes it a conspiracy fact, is there was a worldwide mud flood recently, because these buildings that they have a narrative on of the 1800s, which is false. It's a false narrative of the construction of these buildings. That's why they call it Freemasonry, because they found it. They got it for free, and that's why they call them founders, because they found it. But what you're going to find is it was recent, because you could tell by the maps and you could tell by the buildings. They're sunk in the mud. So, and that's been covered up. So for them to never talk about this mud flood reality that took place all throughout the earth, a catastrophe in our recent years, and we haven't been told anything about it in history, but it's affected everything during a certain period of time. It also, during the mud flood, I didn't mention this, but it caused liquefaction, but it also caused the volcanoes to occur and erupt, and it caused earthquakes to occur. It caused stuff like, if you had lakes and they were bound by, walls of dirt, it would cause them to be unbound. That's another thing that would occur. Like, some people believe in the Grand Canyon area that was a big old lake, a huge one that took up several states. I think UAP mentioned that one on the UAP channel, and that had a lot to do with connecting California, maybe because those walls busted out, and that was such a huge lake, possibly, and it eroded all throughout, all the way down to the ocean, and it also increased the water line of the ocean because it was such a large lake. That's why parts of our shores are missing from the older maps. But you got these star forts, they're everywhere. You got these cathedrals, these Greco-Roman buildings, these mosques, all of this stuff. And, you start to see that in the Bible, it would talk about after the millennial kingdom, there'll be a time where there'll be an end to that, and then Satan would be loosed for a short season, and then from there, that it talks about the rest of the dead would come back. So, like I said, we don't know who those are, but they are. If this is the narrative we're in, then they would be our great grandparents, and a lot of them seem to come out of. Sometimes you'll see them coming out of these big monstrosity Greco-Roman buildings. I mean, almost like there'll be a building in the middle of nowhere because the infrastructure's gone. It's sunk in the mud or something, and it's all mudded out. There's no trees or anything, and then you find there's just flocks of people coming out of this one building, and it's like several things. I mean, were they somehow underground hidden, or was there a rapture and then the rest of the dead came back and they came out of buildings? And then there was also children that came from these cabbage patches. Seems like live children being pulled up out of cabbage patches and sold and all kinds of stuff, being in incubators. The incubator was created in the 1800s. They were in carnivals, and a doctor created it, but he wasn't a doctor. He was a false doctor. And they used to have live babies at the carnival and incubators. They'd have all kinds of things. They had insane asylums everywhere, and then they had all these orphanages where they'd send 30,000 children at a clip, man, from different countries, from this country to that country. We're talking about at the same time, same year eras, like from Russia or Europe or the U.S. They had orphan trains in the U.S. just to ship the kids from the east to the west coast. So, interesting stuff. And then you'll find that there's not any trees that are older than 500 years old on the whole earth. We do have the redwoods and here and there speckled about, but we're talking about and the ones that are above 500 years old, or not, or at that range, there's only like 50 of them, and they're really ragtag looking trees. So, it's like most of our trees in the whole world are younger than 200 years old. What makes you wonder is there was a mud flood conspiracy, but not only did it make the buildings sink in the mud and volcanoes and earthquakes occur, but it also killed everything that was green. And in some places, geologists could tell, because there's places like in Russia and stuff where they would say that it was a fact that there's forests out there that go for miles and that they were physically planted somehow, like in the early 1800s, that they can tell this. So it's some weird stuff, man. And then the empty cities in and around the 1830s. It makes you wonder, when they have all these wars and things, they're carpet bombing all these countries and all these cities. And at least, maybe there were wars, but I'll tell you this, along with that war, they sure made sure that they destroyed as many of these buildings as they could, because eventually we were going to catch on if there were still so many of them as there were in the 1800s. Because they're huge, and we'd start figuring it out if they were all over the place still, that we couldn't build them. And how did they build them in that fake narrative that we've been told? So, a lot of times you'll find stuff that in World War II, they'll say like that, the Axis powers, who they were in Europe. They would say that they were building all these tunnels and stuff and fortified stuff under the ground. Now, some of that is true. They were building some of that, because there is, but most of it you could tell was there already, and you could tell it was there already because they added the electrical wires and things on the outside of the concrete, which means that those facilities were there already, in my humble opinion. Because you don't do that. You only do that when the structure's there already, and it was before, for instance, water pipes were run or electricity was run. You have to run it on the outside of the walls, because normally you'd put it in the middle of the walls. And so my speculation is that a lot of that stuff underground that the Axis powers were using, that it was there already. The infrastructure under the earth was there already. I mean, or it was infrastructure that sunk in the mud flood, and it was under the earth, in a sense. But that's an interesting thing there. I do think that they continued building them, because there's evidence of that as well. But there was a lot of underground structures, so I don't think they could have built them in that period of time. And so you'll find that a lot of things were created in the 1800s. I mean, even countries became countries in the 1800s. I mean, like, in mass amounts. I mean, the coins that we have, everything seems to have been created since 1800. Look into it yourself. Anything that you eat, drink, build, anything that was built. Literally and virtually anything. And that's a lie. And they call it the years of enlightenment, where, we started believing science again or something like that. But I don't believe that was the case at all. I believe all this stuff that we think we're so smart and we created it, like electricity and stuff, I don't believe that at all. I believe it was here already. And we just, what do you call it, when people, we're squatters or whatever, We came here and we just started sleeping in it, and we just call it ours, and we just were told that, we created it, or we're so smart and we have such great genetics. We have the worst genetics probably that ever walked the earth. Probably the shortest, probably the most genetically unsavvy, and probably the most unscientific, really. The thing is, we don't know how much technology they had before the Millennial Kingdom, because just because they were walking around with flip-flops on doesn't mean that they didn't have technology. It doesn't allude to that they did, but it doesn't allude that they didn't either. And then if we had a tribulation, it all got burned up in the fervent heat. So we really wouldn't know. There would be no evidence of the technology that was here. Okay? That's my thoughts on it. But, so I'm going to end this. This will be part 3 to the Tartarian mud flood kingdom, millennial reign. It's our past, not our future. Of course, this is speculatory, but this is my belief, as well as a lot of other people. Stay tuned for part 4, and Y'all have a blessed day.